Present, ready, excited to hear more about what's on your mind. Go ahead.
So I have a few questions related to the creation process, and it comes with my awareness of all the conversations that I'm experiencing with all of us. So, so I do appreciate and I do see the value in the balance between negative and positive, where that labels dissipate and then it becomes just a movement, and then my awareness of where I am within the creation process. But then sometimes I get caught very gently and softly, but still I have this thought that I never asked you. Like, okay, so, being for so many years and, forever loving Abraham and Esther, and then, the law of attraction, which I believe you call mutuality, and inviting things, which actually feels softer for me. But then I'm thinking, well, I still get caught when I have some wobble or negative emotion into thinking, oh shit, I might be attracting something like that, But within the same time, once something that I have invited and attracted happens, and even though it's, let's call it contrast experience, in Abraham words, then I'm actually very soft with that, because once it's here, I'm like, okay, well, it's here. It doesn't matter how, so I don't go back. But I do want your perspective, particularly on how our thoughts, negative or positive, are fueling invitation to what we're experiencing and creating within our lives.
At all times, your attention, you giving attention to something, is you giving attention. You giving attention gets for you to measure. You cannot give attention or be focused and not measure. And that's why we say, well, that's a natural place in physicality with more and more variety there is. More and more people on the planet, more and more people coming together, exchanging cultures. Sometimes you might feel like things are going in a direction where everyone is becoming the same, but it's similar experiences. It brings so much more variety. In other words, there is nothing for you to look in any other way or any other direction, but for you to understand that every time you do give attention, you measure. Every time you do give attention, you are then looking into comparison of some kind. Is that about the positive emotion and positive feeling of measuring how far you've gotten, or is that in a place of some kind of negative feeling based off of what you're having at that moment? So you can say that you attract with more attention into negative, discomforting place, you can stay there and attract more of those experiences, or in the place of positive, you can attract more of those things. But we like to think, we like to say, we like to suggest to you that that measurement is really what gets you often to be in a place of holding on to negative question, and then trying to hold on to answer. While the question answer in its natural movement, it's there. And if you go from the place of focus into the place of a softer observation to that perspective of a wider kind, then at that moment you see the beauty of the whole creation process and the value in each of those experiences. Kosta has been really resonating more and more, gradually, incrementally, but more and more about something he's heard for quite some time now. It's been months since he's heard that when you get to the place of steady, he's heard that moment you really want to get yourself surrounded by so much more variety. You want to throw yourself in variety where somebody will be pushing your buttons so you can see how much more steadiness you can bring to your experience. We understand that if there were so many buttons that are being pushed in a question ping pong, now you develop this place of so much more, so many tools to get you to the place of steady, but you did not get to the place of steady or to have more in your attention and awareness, that love and appreciation and satisfaction and bliss, but for you to have that and then apply it to something else. So what are you applying your steady to? You're applying it to the new question so you can see how much more steady can come through. You're applying it to that pebble in the shoe so you can go and have more and more and more and more. And once you get to the place of understanding about that other part of the creation process that we've been really stubborn for quite some time now, probably for at least half of the time of these broadcasts, this other part of creation process, then you stop measuring the negative as much as you stop measuring the positive. Because when you start measuring the positive, you're still measuring, which means you're so much more activating the attention, and there is possibility for you to go back into the negative. So feeling satisfaction, feeling the question, feeling the bliss, feeling question, feeling some more excitement, feeling another question, feeling a little bit more of that which you call really thrill and enthusiasm, and then some curiosity. In other words, question, curiosity on this side, and all the positive feelings on the other side, consistently dancing. No one holding on to anything, knowing that the movement is now there. The moment you see the movement from that wider perspective, which is you from that wider perspective, then everything seems perfectly organized and orchestrated within you, to where you find that steadiness. You cannot wait to see what is going to be there. Like there was this lady to try, not on purpose, but through her own effort to do everything the right her way. You might even feel somebody's trying to push your buttons. You might even feel somebody's trying to throw you off. You might even feel somebody's really trying to play by the rules, even though you know that those rules are not really true. But then all of the rules become yours. And once all of the rules become yours, you're really equally satisfied to look for trouble and be in trouble as you are to feel the satisfaction that comes from that place of formulating question.
So, the way I see the value in the question, because I clearly see the value in the answer, and I also see clearly the value in the question, is that it's part of the creation process, and it's obviously without the question you don't have the answer, and actually the question is what clarifies your preference, and then how we, from Abraham Hicks' words, we shot the rocket of desire, So that's all, and that actually soothes me a lot, because my knowing about that simultaneously, as I have a question, the answer is created, gives me a lot of ease within that movement. However, I would like to go beyond that, because lately you've been talking a lot about inclusivity and welcoming everything and everyone. And but sometimes I still get caught into seeing things that even not like certain scenarios and events that not even like affecting me directly, but still they.
If you give your attention to something, it affects you. It does not matter if it's somebody else's business. When you give it your attention, it's your business too. What we want to bring to your attention is, we often say that in the moment of the question, there is an answer. And immediately at that moment, clarity of question brings you to the clarity of answer. Clarity of question brings the answer. And then when you experience the answer, you get clarity of that answer to already births another question, that now you're on a way to that another question. But we never explain it in this way that we will do right now. And that is, at the moment of you experiencing negative emotion, there is a positive emotion to be experienced. At the moment of you experiencing discomfort, there is comfort and satisfaction to be experienced. In other words, those are also existing simultaneously. Your negative and positive feeling are also existing simultaneously, moving through. And so if you're at this moment experiencing positive emotion, there is the negative emotion there too. And if you're experiencing the negative emotion, the positive emotion is there too. Which side you see more predominantly is the case, but they're both there at all times. Which one you choose to see and satisfyingly bring into your experience, or sometimes not, it's up to you and about your pointer of your flashlight of attention based off of what is the habit of where you like to point that attention.
So, okay, yes, sure. Okay, so then I want more clarity with, like sometimes, for example, there is, like seeing from the eyes of source, or source is always focused on the
Instead of
wanted.
using those words, instead of seeing it from the eyes of this one, or seeing it from the eyes of you, or seeing it from the eyes of someone else, or seeing it from the eyes of you, how about you see it from your wider perspective, and you see it from your own more pointed, focused perspective. You see it from a more wider, zoomed out perspective, and then you see it from your own zoomed in perspective. The moment you see that it's all you and you and you and you dancing consistently between your perspectives, not even dancing between the perspectives, dancing as those perspectives. In other words, the dance would not be there without both perspectives dancing together. Think about the most satisfying dancing couple that you can see, and that is what really dance between your question and answer is at all times.
Okay. So what is beyond that? Because what I want to say is like, so I feel like, my wider perspective or everything that exists perspective, which I am, it's focusing on the wanted, and then my self perspective is focusing on the question and quote unquote unwanted. But then so both blended would be beingness. If there is no separation, like how
your wider perspective, you have everything that exists perspective, your God divine perspective is not making those preferences of wanted and unwanted. Everything is wanted from that wider perspective of you, because everything at all times is beneficial to you. And so from that perspective, everything is wanted, and then from this self perspective, you're making preferences. And from this perspective, everything is wanted, and then you, from this narrow perspective, you're making preferences. Look at that from a place of when you feel at ease and satisfied and loving, you can give your attention to anything and nothing bothers you. That is that wider perspective. And then when you're making preferences, when you're measuring, when you're giving your attention to something, you don't get to that place as easily. In other words, you might need to use the tool to get to that place of steady. But once you're again in that place of steady, then you see it from that everything that is his perspective, and you're really not having any trouble with anything or anyone that you give your attention to. And so that is the dance that is happening at all times. Some trouble, no trouble. Some trouble, no trouble. Some trouble, no trouble. When you understand that there is really no identity or no necessity for you to identify the trouble from no trouble, that is when you really just are. That is really the definition of just being present in the moment, the definition of just being.